Good morning, everybody. Today is August 28th. Here's your COVID update. I'm Dr. Vuong. I am suffering some terrible allergies. I apologize. I'll try not to scratch my nose, but it's bad. I mean, today's numbers in the United States is 191,000 cases. Surprise! Louisiana is all full of COVID, and hospitals are full, and ICUs are full. And there is probably Hurricane Ida, which is projected to become a Category 4 hurricane. There's only 5 categories. It's going to become a Category 4 hurricane. And it's going to make, right now, projected to make a direct hit on New Orleans. New Orleans, a major city. Most of the ICU beds in the state. I mean, it's just going to be horrible. So you have to imagine... Not only do you have COVID, not only are you, at home you're feeling bad, but let's say you're in the hospital, you're in a regular hospital ward, you've got all these machines, IVs, you've got oxygen, this power supply, and then you have patients in the ICU, and you're in the ICU right now because you're really fucking sick. What's happened is because there's such a backlog that people who would normally meet criteria to be in the ICU because they're sick are being held in step-down units or makeshift wards. Floor nurses who are used to doing less intensive work are having to, and they're not trained, they're having to do the work of ICU nurses, which is it's a different level of training. It's kind of like asking an internist to do surgery. You don't want an internist doing surgery. I mean, that's just not what they're trained for. It's not better or worse. I mean, that's just not what they're trained for. So now you've got makeshift wards full of really sick ICU level patients who, because there's no ICU beds, can't go. Then you have the sickest of the sick people in an ICU that are on ventilators, on multiple drips, things that are trying to, fight off this COVID. And all the stuff we talked about last year, pneumonia, the ARDS, filling up of the lungs, the microemboli, the thrombus, the clots, right? Now you have a hurricane coming. And when a hurricane hits... because I went through several, but I had a personal experience with it was just a tropical storm, but tropical storm Allison just sat on top of Houston, much like Harvey did a few years ago, and flooded our medical center. So, and our hospital generators were in basements, were on street levels, and the flooding got so bad, our generators went out. Hospitals lost power. And people were scrambling. And after recovery, most hospitals put their generators up on rooftops because they got smart. I don't know if that's the case in New Orleans, but let's just assume there's going to be some power outages. So what happens when this power goes out? You're on a ventilator. The ventilator is breathing for you. The patient is asleep in a coma, basically, because they have drips running to keep them in a coma-induced state. So they're calm, they can handle the breathing tube, they can rest. We tell patients' families, we're resting them so we can give their lungs a break so they don't tire out. These are things you might have heard from the doctor. And so, if the power goes out, these medicines, these drips, are on, machines on pumps that are plugged into the wall. And yes, they have battery, but once they lose power and they're on battery supply, the battery will go low and will stop if the power is out long enough. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is if the power goes out, the ventilator machine goes out. So now what happened when we got flooded, we had to manually breathe. So you don't have enough manpower to sit there, or woman power, to sit there and disconnect the patient from the ventilator, put them on a breathing bag, and manually count 18 breaths. And then your hands get tired. You're literally manually pushing this ambu bag for a patient who's in a coma, an induced coma. I'm having horrible thoughts flashing back to when this happened to us. And depending on what happens, where the hospital is located, when Allison hit, some of my surgical residents, they had to carry patients. Elevators don't fucking work, guys, right? When the power's out, elevators don't work. So they are carrying patients up flights of stairs because water was pouring into the building and starting to flood first and second floors, wherever hospital beds are. So I'm not on call when this happens. This is Tropical Storm Alicia, or Allison, or at least Allison. And then, so the next day, I'm supposed to come in to round, to take over the shift. I can't get out of my neighborhood. I mean, the roads are totally flooded. We were flooded. So you have this very tired crew who would normally go home the next morning, right, when their shift is over, and there's no relief for them. And they've been up all night. They've been manually, bagging patients. They've been carrying people up flights of stairs. And it's one thing to carry someone who's healthy. It's horrible when you've got patients who are on ventilators and drips and IVs, and you're trying to navigate. You've got 3-4 people trying to carry these patients up flights of stairs. It's a disaster scene. So my resident mates, they got special recognition because they were on call that night. I could not get to the hospital for my shift for until the evening, till the water receded. So I didn't come in for 12 hours later. Anyway. These are things that we don't think about when we choose not to vaccinate, when we choose not to. It's my body, it's my choice. You're a fucking moron. It's just horrible. My body, my choice, except doesn't apply to your uterus. Your uterus is also my body. It makes no sense. People who keep spouting these conspiracy theories, keep spouting this personal freedom bullshit, starting to sound selfish, starting to sound like idiots, starting to sound like part of the problem. And what I don't want, listen to me, what I don't want is for us to lose our humanity. Because if you go on my fan page or YouTube channel, you can read some of these comments that says if they don't get vaccinated, then they don't need to be treated by doctors. We're not allowed to do that. If they're not vaccinated, they shouldn't be put on ventilators. We can't do that. Doctors can't do that. We have to treat everybody the same. This was a big thing back in the 90s when richer hospitals were turning away patients who were uninsured, right? And not treating them in their emergency rooms and sending them to the county hospitals and things like that. Dude, they got their asses sued. We cannot do that. You have to treat everybody the same. If somebody is sick, whether they're black, white, gay, trans, rich, poor, vaccinated or unvaccinated, we have to, and ethically and correctly, we have to treat them with our best of abilities. Now, what is going to happen is that we're running out of resources. There's not ICU beds, ventilator, and people go, remember that whole ventilator hoax? You might be right. Like, it didn't happen. People forget. Why did we not run out of ventilators last year? Who knows? Who knows the answer? We shut down the fucking world. That's why we didn't run out of ventilators. People didn't get sick. We ramped up ventilator production just in case, and then luckily we didn't have to use it. And now anti-vaxxers are using that as a reason that this is all hype and overblown. Like, dude, last year we did the correct thing. We shut it down. Shut down the world. Not just the United States, the world. So now what you're going to see is, and I did videos about this last surge in the holidays. You're running out of resources. You're having to allocate resources. People who would normally be in the hospital last year during the fall surge, remember this? During the holiday surge, they were treating people at home. They were doing telemedicine. They were like, good luck. We don't have any beds. Go home. One of the nurses or somebody will call you tomorrow. Follow up with your doctor. We're getting back to that situation again. We have people, and you're going to start seeing reports of people dying while waiting to be treated. Not that we're not withholding care, because you can't do that. You literally don't have resources. And it's not just beds. I understand that news stories, news outlets talk about ICU beds and things like, dude, it's not even the fucking beds. It is literally, you do not have enough sedation medicine. You do not have enough painkiller. You do not have enough propofol. You run out of these medicines. You run out of pumps. You run out of personnel. You run out of respiratory techs. You run out of nurses. You run out of doctors. It's just so bizarre to me. Like, why? Because you think you know more about vaccines than the people who actually study it? Like, you're willing to risk your life and your family's life and these other healthcare workers who have their own fucking families? What's wrong with you, man? Anyway, August 28th, Hurricane Ida's coming. God, like, this is insanity. We cannot withhold care. We are just going to run out of supply. Okay? That's what's going to happen. And it is spreading up. Sturgis, Chicago, Minnesota, California, Oregon. I mean, shit's already shutting down. Some states are trying to get ahead of it by requiring mask mandates again. And it's fucking like, let me tell you something. There is somebody on this video who's going to post, well, what about protests? Like this is okay, but protest? Like, dude, I do not go to protest. There is going to be this weekend a voting rights march in like 4 or 5 major cities, DC, Houston's one of them. My skinny little Asian ass is not going to be participating in no fucking voting rights march. No gathering, no protest. See, it goes both ways. And it doesn't matter your politics. The virus doesn't care. So that's where we are, man. Like, I'm starting to get frustrated. Sorry. Hey, I love you. Stay safe. I'll try to be back tomorrow.